Before I found out about hat format, I have been playing a lot of Edison format, and today I have one of two anti-meta decks that I will be introducing to you, telling you why I chose each card, and the deck works pretty well for me, and today I'm going to share it with you, and I'd love to know what your thoughts are down below. Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. If you are new here, my name is Kyle, I am your guy with too many YouTube channels. Let's get straight into the deck build for today. We're going to stroll through the monsters, spells, traps, extra deck. We're going to get into all of those great things. So, we do have two copies of Cyber Dragon. First of all, in Edison, I do believe Cyber Dragon is a little bit of an underrated card, but we are going to get a little bit more into why I chose to include two Cyber Dragons into the deck, so that will be brought up again. We have two copies of Doom Caliber Knight. This kind of faded out in time, and this might be one of those cards that I ended up cutting out of my other build, but this still works, don't get me wrong. It is a very, very nice card for the time that Edison was around. Doom Caliber Knight just immediately negates anything that anybody's supposed to do, and it's in a format where you can have a lot of continuous effects going on. Doom Caliber Knight is something that you can get away with having on the field, and it always just stops your opponent, which is very nice. Three copies. Thunder King Ryo. This is one of the staples of an anti-meta deck, of course. The strength being neither player can add any cards from their deck to their hand except by drawing them. Plus, you do have that one special summon negate. Having this, especially in any sort of anti-meta deck, is honestly, I'd be shocked if anybody had a deck full of that and not having three copies. Let's continue on to one of my favorite anti-meta cards, and always will have three in this deck type. Three copies of King Tiger Wangu. If a monster with 1400 or less attack is normal or special summoned while you control this card, destroy those monsters. It is incredible. It helps pretty well against like any deck having this thing out. As long as you can have this and maybe one other copy with something with a continuous effect, dude, you lock your opponents down so well. They end up having to set their monsters and then flip summoning if you don't end up attacking them by then. Let's continue on to one of the staples of the anti-meta decks. I have three copies of the good old Fossil Dyna. Neither player can special summon monsters. Another fantastic continuous effect. Now, I've heard people talk about anti-meta decks where sometimes this can get in the way with King Tiger Wangu. Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes you're forced to set it, flip it face up. It's not a big deal. Those two cards are so good together to the point where it's like, okay, I'll do my best to summon Fossil Dyna first. If it doesn't work out, I'll set it and I'll wait a turn. This card is still a must. I have that and King Tiger Wangu at 3. Continuing on, we have 3 copies of Banisher of the Radiance. Any card sent to the graveyard is banished instead. Again, helps against the vast majority of decks. Nobody wants their cards banished, and we don't really have a graveyard to work with over here. We're working with our continuous effects. We're working with the field. We're working on shutting down people. Banisher of the Radiance is an excellent card for an anti-meta deck. Let's continue on to one copy of Neospatian Granville. Sometimes your opponent has a card that you just can't get rid of. A big synchro monster, a big fusion monster. Easy peasy. Either set it or attack, send them both back to the hand. This is always a good option to have if there's a monster that you're struggling with and can't really get rid of. Let's continue on to a card that I've been in and out with my anti-meta decks, Marshmelon. Sometimes that 1000 damage really hits. Sometimes you need a little bit of time to set up your board. That happens, and having a card that can't be destroyed by battle kind of puts a halt to things every once in a while. I do like having Marshmelon in my anti-meta deck. Let's continue on to one copy of Plague Spreader Zombie. Just to give us that synchro option. There's not a ton of times where I find myself using Plague Spreader Zombie, but the benefit that it does bring when you need it is extremely helpful. Plague Spreader Zombie is another great card to have in an anti-meta deck, in my opinion, because it opens up a whole door of monsters that you can add. Let's continue on, though, guys. That was all of the monster cards. We have one copy of Heavy Storm for the first spell card. A staple. What can you say? I wouldn't mind it if you wanted to switch out for like something like MST for this, but continue on for the next card. Creature Swap. A very, very underrated card, in my opinion. Sometimes your opponent is left with just one monster, and you have a lot of useless monsters that's not really helpful to your opponent. So, Creature Swap, give me it. I think it is a very, very underrated card, not only in Edison format, but in Yu-Gi-Oh history. Sometimes, when your opponent works so hard to get a big monster, you just take it. Continuing on, a better version of Heavy Storm, in my opinion. We have one copy of Giant Trunade. If your opponent ever has something you need to get rid of, yeah, if you need to set up your field, Giant Trunade is an excellent option for it. Giant Trunade is in the vast majority of my decks, especially in the Edison format. One copy of Book of Moon, another kind of staple card, stop and attack. That's pretty well what I end up using it for, but every once in a while you can stop effects. You can maybe stop some synchro plays. Book of Moon is a really, really good quick play spell. Now, where I stand out from the rest of the pack when it comes to anti-meta decks is equip spell cards. I think it's incredibly helpful because especially once we get into the traps, we have protection for these, okay? 2 copies of United We Stand. This card is so underrated. And even if you just have one copy of something on the field, your anti-meta monsters are typically pretty weak, okay? You have 1600, you have 1200, just to add an 800 attack boost to that, plus we get more monsters, 800 for each monster, you can make your anti-meta cards flat out beat sticks. I think this is an incredible card, and it's an underrated card. These have helped me win duels, these have saved the day on multiple occasions, and I will not have United We Stand in my deck. Same thing, Mage Power. We are a trap and spell heavy deck. A little bit of the same thing, although I do like United We Stand a little bit more. Mage Power is also phenomenal. I like the equipped spell cards. I think in this version of Yu-Gi-Oh!, this format of Yu-Gi-Oh!, the equipped spell cards are very underrated. Let's continue on though, because that is all of the spells. One copy of Radiant Mirror Force. Of course, we can't have multiple copies of Mirror Force this time around. This trap card, I'd be okay if you wanted to talk about swapping out, but at the end of the day, I still like having another version of Mirror Force in here. Of course, we also have a copy of Mirror Force, one of the staple trap cards of the format. Destroy all your attack position monsters on the opponent's side of the field. Very, very solid, very strong, great card. 2 copies of Starlight Road. With the amount of spells and traps and monsters that we will have out, we need the built-in defense for things like Heavy Storm, things like, and excuse me, it's escaping my mind at the moment with Dark Hole is allowed in Edison, but you have multiple cards. Blackwing is very popular, Icarus Attack, things like that. There are a lot of cards that will destroy 2 or more cards on your field, and Starlight Road does a phenomenal job not only negating it, but if you do not have Fossil Dyna out, you can get a Stardust Dragon, which is always a beautiful +1, but honestly, I get that this could get in the way with things like Royal Oppression, with things like Fossil Dyna. I don't care. You still get the negation out of it, guys. Starlight Road is an incredible card. It is in pretty well every single one of my builds. Let's continue on. 1 copy of Magic Cylinder, guys. This is also one of the most underrated cards in the entire game. This can win you duels. Your opponent gets a big beat stick out, all of a sudden, boom, 2500 damage. Boom, 3000 damage. It is so underrated. And the amount of times that you just play this card and you win a duel because of Magic Cylinder, until you start playing this card, you will not realize how underrated it is, man. Let's continue on. 3 copies of Deep Prison, one of the staples of the deck. Remove a monster from play, gets around pretty well. A lot of effects that would be involved in, getting around some attack reflector monsters, things like that. Dimensional Prison is also a very, very good card. 3 copies of Compulsory Evacuation Device. This is one of my personal staples, although it is a staple in the Edison format. Return a monster to the hand. It is perfect to stop your opponent in their tracks with whatever they are doing. This is one of my favorite trap cards in the entire game. It is very, very good. Let's continue on to a card that I imagine I will hear a little bit about. Wall of Revealing Light. Also an underrated card in Edison format. Typically, all you need to do is pay 3,000 life points. Sometimes it works out. Sometimes it doesn't, guys. We do have a couple cards that, help out, make you gain a little bit of life points. But sometimes this thing's around and you can halt opponents for like a good 3-4 turns. Doesn't always work that way, but I think it's worth the gamble all the time usually. I'm one of those players that has no problem paying my life points to have my protection. So Wall of Revealing Light is a very underrated card. Give it a try, guys. Now, DNA Surgery. Remember we spoke about circling back to those Cyber Dragons? Every once in a while, this just works out, okay? At the end of the day, the Cyber Dragons are useful by themselves. If you don't run into the DNA Surgery, you don't run into it. Sometimes it can be a little bit of a dead draw if you don't run into the Cyber Dragons. But this can be helpful for particular deck types, just changing all of the monster to machines. But if your opponent has a nice field, even if you want to get rid of just one singular monster, boom, Chimera Tech Fortress Dragon. I like this for an anti-meta card, just changing the types of the monsters, and I like the potential of just using all of your opponent's cards for your own fusion summon. Let's continue on to 2 copies of Royal Oppression. Anti-meta deck, it's a staple. We'll stop all the special summoning. Great card, self-explanatory. And then 1 copy of Solomon Judgment. No matter what format I'm playing Yu-Gi-Oh! In, whatever amount of copies of Solomon Judgment I'm allowed is the amount that I'm going to be playing. We are allowed 1 copy of Solomon Judgment in this deck, in this format, excuse me. You can negate anything. Sometimes you need to negate it. Having that spell speed 3 counter trap card, I don't care if I have to pay half my life points, Solemn Judgment is putting a halt to whatever you're doing. I love this card. I love the Solemn cards. Dark Bribe is the next trap card that we have. I think this one's underrated. I don't care that it gives your opponent a +1. I don't care. Sometimes you just need to negate a spell or trap. Sometimes you need that spell speed 3. Dark Bribe gets the job done. I know a lot of people like, seven Tools of the Bandit. Sorry, I'm having a blank. 7 tools. It's 7 tools something, where you pay the 1,000 life points and you negate a trap card. I like the idea that you can negate a spell and a trap card, okay? Dark Bribe is hands down one of my favorite negating cards, okay? That is it for the main deck, and let's continue on over to the extra deck. They are your basic synchro monsters over here. Of course, we only have Plague Spreader Zombie to work around with. Having one for every level, I'm a big fan of Thought Ruler Archfiend when it's possible to get out, because again, we are paying life points in this deck, and Thought Ruler Archfiend is an underrated card in this deck. We have the 3 copies of Chimera Tech Fortress Dragon. 3 copies because, you know, sometimes your opponents run a Cyber Dragon. Sometimes. You never know. You don't use the extra deck too much in this deck, but the anti-meta deck does a fantastic job at just shutting things down in general. I would love to know if you build this yourself. If you use it, let me know how it works out for you. It works out pretty well for me. Thank you so much for watching a video, everybody. Why don't you check out this video we recently made about the dumbest rules in Yu-Gi-Oh history. I would love to have you over there. Thank you very much for watching the video, everybody. Take care.